Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
That's the other part of the equation. Don't read too much into it, but it's to get a fair assessment of a guy. Yeah, you got to let them work. You know, he's with the one offense, but he's going against one defense, or is it the two defense? And we work a lot more one versus one typically. We'll break away from that every now and then, you know, this time of year. So you got to factor all that stuff into and just, you know, try to get see where guys really at.
Context amid claims of controversy and competition. That is the storyline, one of many we're following after Kids Day at Kinnick on August 10th. We are now 19 days out from kickoff at Kinnick again for the 2024 opener between Iowa, now 25th in the AP preseason poll, just released a couple hours ago against Illinois State. Welcome to Eye on the Hawks. I'm Mitch Fick alongside Owen Sebring and Mike Howell. Lots to break down from that scrimmage on August 10th. Lots to talk on online. We kind of jokingly say, half kidding, half serious about the bold conclusions people will jump to after an open scrimmage, and certainly some conclusions being leaped to. I was not there on Saturday, so I have no business saying anything to start this off, so I'm going to hand over the reins to Mike and Owen, what you guys saw and what you were taken aback by or encouraged by or anything in between on Saturday in front of the fans at Kinnick to start 2024.
I mean, I always like to explain or at least preempt many commentary by saying that, like, our roles are just kind of different when us as shooters go there for events like this, just because we are kind of in the business of gathering video that we're going to use for the next few months. This is the last time we get a chance to see, basically the only time in the calendar year we get to see a practice for the University of Iowa. We don't get to see anything else the rest of the year, and so we're just collecting video, and so I won't say that my insight is probably the most valuable compared to some other beat writers on the scene, but I just personally don't put a lot of stock into what happens during these open practices, because I know that they're not going to showcase a whole lot of their playbook or open things up all that much. There you saw Quinn Schulte with a nice pick six on Cade. There were a few nice catches from some guys. Good break up there by Castro. Some guys had nice catches. We saw a lot of guys out of the running back room. A lot of guys getting action again with LaShawn Williams on the sideline recovering from his minor injury. We saw Jazz Patterson out there a bunch. Saw a lot of Caleb Johnson. Saw a lot of Kamari Moulton. So I don't read too much into what we saw. I know there are some speculations going around with what kind of numbers Cade had together and how many completions he had, how many touchdowns he did or didn't throw, but that is not, for me, all that much of a concern, because it's just going to be so much different when they line it up against Illinois State. But Mike, any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, you know, I was there in I didn't shoot that day. I went as a fan, and I just sit in the, the fan section on that one side. You know, I think in the moment I was a little more like, man, I was hoping to see a lot more from this offense and this new offense than we actually did. I knew they weren't going to come out and show a lot of their playbook and whatnot. I think we saw one RPO that I counted. I just was kind of underwhelmed at the offense, but at the same time, they're going against one of the best defenses in the country, so that's a point of context. I think Cade's, here, I wrote it down somewhere, Cade's official non-official, I should say, stat line was, just let me pull it up real quick. There is a graphic we had that I did not get to put in the show. Anyway, he had 20 yards passing on 24 attempts, and I think about like 8 to 10 completions. So not the greatest. There weren't many throws downfield, which gave her, who knows if that's anything alarming or whatnot. There were a couple that he tried to fit in tight windows that ended up in pass breakups. That pass breakup that you saw, if you're watching on YouTube, that Castro had, I mean, Castro was tugging on his jersey. I think that's a flag on a normal day. I don't think the ref saw it. But I think, it is concerning only in the fact that Cade McNamara hasn't done it at a high level for 2 years, healthy. The good thing is he looked healthy.
Yep.
He scrambled two or three times.
Yep.
I think the first time he scrambled, he got like 20 yards, and the people around me were like, oh, like holding their breath, like, please don't have a repeat of last year. At the same time, Sullivan had a little bit better stats. I think he threw for 74 yards, non-official, but he's also going against the twos, a lower step in competition. So there's a lot of context added to those numbers, and I think at least when I looked at some of the beat reporters, they did put it in context. Although there is a narrative running on social media about there being a QB controversy. So take that with a grain of salt. I think the real measurement will be in 2 or 3 weeks, but it's just hard to talk about it now when there's camp going on, and I wish writers and TV people could be led into some more practices to see kind of what it looks like day to day. Now I know Kirk was asked if this was like kind of typical day, that what he's seen from Cade and Sully, and he said it was. So yeah.
I always wonder if on a day like Saturday, if they at 12:30 or whatever, they say, okay, bye fans, bye kids, bye everybody, and then lock the doors and say, all right, let's do our real practice now. Like, I just wonder how much of a show that is versus entertainment or an actual practice and what we think we're going to see. But Mitch, I know you were out of town for the weekend, but what's the general sense that you kind of picked up on from the people you spoke to about Saturday?
I think I was just disappointed in the narratives that popped out. Like, we tell ourselves every year it's a spring scrimmage or a fall scrimmage. It's for the fans. They never show anything. And then the first thing I see, and I don't know, and not the first time we've talked about anything like this, but just this desperation for definition. We have to see something and give it some sort of absolute definitive role or place, and can't just let things happen, and understand that Cade hasn't played live football in 10 and a half months, and this is his 10th, 11th practice of playing live football in 10 and a half months, and he's learning a new system as he comes back. And I start seeing stat lines for a fall scrimmage. And
Finally got that up if you want to see it.
And like, okay.
I do think it's
like interesting, but again, like, Cade played against the ones, Brendan played against 2s and 3s. Brendan's fresher in terms of just more rep. He went through spring at Northwestern, and Cade has just kind of been walking through stuff for a long time. They're just two immensely different scenarios, and now you're walking out into a scrimmage where nothing is ever shown. Lystico, who had one of the kind of headlines out there that we were just like, all right. But then like actually got it in the context of his article, and even pointed out in 2015, that fall scrimmage, it didn't look good. And then you go play football, and things worked out okay in 2015 for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Yeah. So like, not to be jaded and contrarian, but just like, all right, it's August 10th. If he's still doing this August 20th, 25th, the idea that Cade's not going to be the starter on August 31st, I think is silly. Yeah,
there's no way.
That's silly. Yeah. Now, does Brendan maybe get snaps on August 31st? Sure. But the idea that what you guys saw or what anybody saw for an hour and a half on a Saturday in early still August, if that's going to impact what happens going into September and October and November, like, slow down.
And Brendan did take a small handful of reps with the ones. I know Kirk said afterwards not to read too much into that. But if anything, I feel like Hawkeye fans should at least be a little bit maybe even encouraged at the fact that the QB situation is so much better this year compared to what it was last year, because, I mean, ideally you have a healthy Cade, but the backup situation, if Cade were to go down, is so much more favorable than what we had a year ago. Brendan Sullivan's going to bring a lot of experience and a lot of talent to the table if Cade can't make it through the full season healthy. So I feel like Hawkeye fans should at least be happy that they have two quarterbacks out there who have a lot of Big Ten, big game experience that could get it done if their number is called.
I wonder if that plays into why people have the opinion of like the switch now of just, well, now there is a guy there and there is a known. It's not, you're not calling for a kid in Joey Labus who started a bowl game and they won the bowl game. I get it. He threw a touchdown. That was a screen that Luke took 25 yards past the line of scrimmage. Like, you have an actual data set with Brendan Sullivan, a guy who was started in the Big Ten, played very well in the Big Ten. There's actual knowable football acumen and display, rather than we had 2 pick sixes and this guy started, throw him in there, get him in there, like bench this other kid. I think there's just more, there's a lot more to be comfortable with in that room, not just with Brendan Sullivan, but even going down to Marco has taken snaps in a live game. It was cleanup duty in a bowl game, but he's taken those snaps in a live game. So that makes you feel better about the 3. Jackson Stratton is guys who's walked on and has played in a Power 5 school as well. That gives you a little more. Not a lot of teams can say they're comfortable about what their 4th quarterback has done. Iowa probably is, because they've got a kid in Jackson Stratton, and you've got Razor coming in from high school, and he's a prospect they're excited about. He's the redshirt, he's not really part of the equation, but that, just in terms of what you know about that room and what they can do in live action, is so much more expanded than it was 6 months ago, let alone 12 months ago, that I think maybe that fuels that fire and call for change more immediate, because, well, now we're not dipping our toe into some unknown. You know Brendan Sullivan can go out and win you a football game in the Big Ten. I think it does, though, give you an acknowledgement of, okay, like, that wasn't great on the 10th. It is what it is. It's early in fall camp. There's a lot to figure out. But if it keeps going the way it is, we can flip a little more without hesitation, so to speak. I think that's what you learn. You learn that building the room the way you have now, you feel more comfortable if you do have to do something. You're more reassured about, okay, like, if we're in a spot, now we do definitely feel a little better.
No, I think that's right. And, not to give any credence, I'm definitely not one of those people who thinks we need to make a switch right away. And I agree that's kind of asinine. I will say, though, there is part of me that is concerned, that we didn't see like a single flash, like, take the stat line, throw it out. But there wasn't a single time where Cade made a throw that you were like, Sullivan, he had a pass to Reese Vandersea that was decent. It was about like a 15-yard, 20-yard pass. Majority of their yards, too, on both sides were screen plays. I know you mentioned a screen in the bowl game a couple years ago. They were checking down a lot. And I think it has a lot to do with the stacked secondary. So then there's more context on what they're going up against.
To an Iowa defense, isn't it?
Yeah. So my other thing is, though, like, Cade hasn't played in 10 months, you mentioned. He's still not going to be getting game experience by the time the first game hits. And I think Iowa will be fine that game, but the second game is what concerns me. Can he, against a stacked Iowa State defense, is he going to look rattled in the pocket? Is he going to be able to make some throws downfield and get a first down when you need to?
I think your big turning point, if there needs to be a decision or anything like that, is Troy. Your 3-game, that'll be your 3rd game. You're all at home. If you need to flip something, I think you have to have it figured out before Big Ten play starts, if there is something to figure out. This is all immensely hypothetical. But I think Troy, you're comforted with the fact that, okay, you start 3 straight at home against non-con teams. We saw it in 2008 when Ricky Stanzi and Jake Christensen literally flipped starts back and forth, and then finally, once you got into conference play, Rick's the guy, let's go. I'm not saying we're there, but I do think there's, if we still get to August 31st and they're like, it's open up, you've got that 3-week cushion all at home, and then after the Troy game, or even if it's in the Troy game, you can make a decision. But until then, that's still Cade's team, but you're very happy that you have Brendan doing what he's doing.
I don't know what you thought, Mike, of Marco Lainez, but even that gives me some intrigue into what the future of Hawkeye football is going to look like at the quarterback spot. Not that we're probably going to see him at least for another year, but he's just fun to watch out there. He is a scrambler, like, at his core.
Yeah.
And so he's just a fun guy to watch, make plays, make guys miss. He's a different kind of quarterback that I feel like they've had the last few years.
Sure, he did make a lot of plays on his feet. I, again, am concerned on the passing side of things, but he has a year or more if Brendan Sullivan is the guy next year, which, if you're looking at the classes of all the quarterbacks, that's what you expect. You never know what guy wants to move on or what guy, sees the writing on the wall or whatnot. Anything could happen between now and then, so I don't think it's just right to say Brendan Sullivan's the guy next year, but that's what it looks like. So he has a couple years to develop. So I think you're encouraged. And earlier, I think in Kids Day, Kirk was asked, and I just don't think he denied it, but he didn't necessarily say there was packages for Marco or Brendan, because they both are mobile and can move. But I think it might be something that we see from the Tim Lester offense. We never know.
I think we just heard from Kirk off the top, just talking about, taking context into consideration, talking about the stuff. He spoke more about quarterback play after Saturday's scrimmage.
A couple of weeks here to really evaluate the team, but yeah, I think considering he got here in June, Yeah, he's making up for some lost ground. You know, and you compare the two guys. You know, Cade hasn't played in 2 years basically, whereas Sully has played. He's been out there and playing a little bit. So that's again where the repetitions are really important for us right now, and especially in team situations are really important.
He got Sullivan got most of the 2 reps. Is that fair to assess of Cade being 1 and Sullivan being 2 right now?
Yeah, and I think we're just gonna let the guys keep playing. All 3 guys keep playing, and I think he's progressing. He's progressing and getting more comfortable. You know, just not to make fun of 7-on-7, but it's got its place. But 7-on-7 is not real football, just like one-on-one stuff. And to me, playing quarterback, comes a point where you got to have 11 guys on the field, both sides working. He's got reads that are hard. Plus, you got to feel the pocket and the rush and all those kinds of things. So, I'm not an expert on quarterbacks. To me, that's kind of what he's missed, being in those scrimmage situations.
2 immediate thoughts. I love that he's already Sully to Kirk. I love that. That's terrific. I also like that I don't think anybody's ever brought up 7-on-7 situations to Kirk, but he will bring it up himself, and you can just hear the venom in his voice anytime he brings up 7-on-7. He's not a fan, and it's to his point, you need 4 more on either side of the ball to really figure it out. But final thoughts on just quarterback and anything, and then we'll hear from Coach Lester about what he saw in his offense. What are our final thoughts?
Just don't panic yet. I mean, there's 3 weeks to figure it out. And if Iowa comes out and lays a stinker at Illinois State, it'd be a different story. I don't see that happening, but give Cade some time. It's his 10th practice, and Tim has talked about they're still trying to install that offense. And the one thing I will say though is I think this roster has playoff potential. So it would be disappointing if they dropped a couple early games and it kept them out of the playoff potential. But, I think the offense should be in a right spot midway through the season. So hopefully you can just get it done with your defense and your punting, which later we'll talk about. There's a reason I'm wearing this shirt, and I was a big fan of Reestaken. But, yeah, that's my final thoughts on the QB situation.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I even going into Saturday was just like, I don't really care all that much about what we see out of Cade or Brendan or Marco or anybody. I know this is so different than what we're going to see in an actual game that this means so incredibly little to me. This is my B-roll collection day, and that's all this is to me. So I am just excited for those guys. I really enjoyed chatting with we talked to all 3 quarterbacks on Friday for Media Day, Cade, Brendan, and Marco, and they're all just very fun guys to chat with, very laid back and easygoing, and it seems like they have a really good situation in the quarterback room right now. They all really like each other a lot and have good relationships. So I think that chemistry is well on its way, and they're going to figure something out this season.
And, of course, their offense is now led by a former quarterback in Tim Lester, 6-7 months on the job now. His first real display of outside of the spring of what the offense can do. But, again, it's a fall scrimmage where they're not going to show a whole heck of a lot. But here's Coach Lester on how the offense install 2.0 after the spring is going here in the fall.
Once they start understanding it, you can start moving things around, and you can start, one word that means something for the Z can mean the same for the Y, can mean the same for the X. And I can't tell you that everyone knows all of them quite yet. I think our quarterbacks have a pretty good beat on it. So we just started really here, and starting next week, we really start just massaging all the language to make sure we're creating a whole new plays that the offense doesn't even know. They were just running what they're hearing. And we've run those things a ton one way, and now we can switch to the pitcher, run the same thing again, and everyone will hear the words and do it. The defense thinks it's a whole new play, and our guys are just running the same thing they've been running. And they don't even know it's different sometimes because they're just listening for their words, and that's the key to this offense. I think that's why it's super flexible. You see it work with a lot of different personnels, and but you got to get to the point where everyone learns it. And they've been studying hard. It's been fun to watch these guys work.
I think that's really important too. Him just reminded of it's a whole new language, and we've heard that parallel drawn a couple times now of just this isn't the old offense. And Kirk has said Tim's running the show. It's almost like having an entirely different head coach on that side of the ball, and you are getting a former head coach on that side of the ball, and a guy who has been a quarterback and just spent a year in the National Football League. And it's easy to just say, oh, the guys just go out and play and run the plays, but there's a lot going on upstairs to figure out too, and that can everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth, is the old saying. And football, you're going to get hit a few times. And so this is all, we're dropped in on August 10th or whenever it may be, and you're watching them in the middle of the fight, so to speak, to flesh things out and figure things out. So I thought that was really good context. Just like, hey, you don't jump from Spanish 1 to Spanish 4 to draw some high school parallels in the language. You learn how to conjugate your verbs really, really well, and then you start writing a sentence or a paragraph.
Yeah, Cade talked about it, the cliche phrase I think we've heard a lot over the last several months about drinking through a fire hose when he's learning the offense, and that's exactly what I think these guys are doing. And to Mitch's point that he made earlier about waiting until they get to Big Ten play to jump to any conclusions, it's like, they are still learning this thing, and it might still take some time in those first few regular season games until they really start to click and feel comfortable on the field with what Tim Lester draws up for them on offense.
Yeah, when you're talking about the offense, we spent 15, 18 minutes, with, rightfully so. Like quarterback's the most important position in football this day and age. But there were positives on the offense. I thought, it looked to me like the running game was in a much better spot, and that's to be expected with such a senior-led offensive line. But they had some holes for Caleb Johnson, and there were some good under rounds that went for 15, 20 yards against the ones, So I think that thing will translate too. So I don't think there's going to be fish out of water on offense. I think the running game should be better. And, once you get playing against weaker defenses, which, you could argue how many teams on the schedule have a weaker defense in Iowa, it might be most of them. Can you move the ball? And I think the running game will really be key. And Tim Lester's preached that as well. Like, it all starts with the running game. And the offensive line, to me, looks better. I'm not an offensive line expert, so I can just see what runs go long, and it's hard to tell too when defenses aren't tackling. They're not going to the full steam. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But to me, that's what I saw. I don't know. I know you were having a camera. If you saw that kind of push from the offensive line.
Yeah, not greatly. I mean, again, they're letting things up a little bit, but I would say, as I pointed out earlier, that maybe that was my highlight takeaway from the day was the running game just looking so good across the board. They were very good last year and had a pretty deep stable that could be relied on in a lot of situations, and I think that's going to be even more prominent this season, especially with a healthy LaShawn Williams. When I think the assumption is that he's going to be back for week 1. But assuming that him and Caleb Johnson are healthy going into that first game, boy, that is a dangerous 1-2 punch in their running back game. And that's going to lead to my one big prediction that I'm going to make for the season. We can save that for our season preview show whenever that time comes. But I really do have incredibly high hopes for what the running game is going to bring this year.
And even going in the future, sorry, Mitch, Xavier Williams, I know he was playing on the third team offense. Xavier Williams, freshman running back, he looked pretty good, taking some snaps back there. Yeah. So I think, and then I know Brevin Dahl was playing more wide receiver.
Sounds like that's going to be his spot too, kind of a la TJ Washington. I mean, Brevin's coming into the program fresh, but TJ, it sounds like, is a wideout. It sounds like Brevin's probably out there too from ADM.
Yeah, TJ did take some running back snaps. He took like half and half. So
again, he's
got to get on the field.
He's a gadget guy.
I think he was impressive.
Think that's going to be fun to see some of these guys of just like plug them in and wherever they can find space, let them have it.
Another young kid, I mean, we're going to talk about defense a little bit later, but another young guy, a freshman, similar to Brevin Dahl coming in that impressed me a little bit was just a little bit I saw out of Preston Reese, who's a true freshman coming out of Monticello. He had a lot of time out there on the field on Saturday, and so he's, I'm sure, not going to see a whole lot of the field this year with the amount of talented linebackers that are in front of him, but he's a guy that might come in his sophomore year and get a lot of playing time, if not starting right away next year.
Yeah, there's some big-name local freshmen that we've followed now for a couple years at the high school level, and you can't help but think there's some opportunity out there.
It was pretty cool when it was like halfway through the 11-on-11 scrimmage, and there was a time when Preston, Cam Buffington, and Derek Weiskopf, did I say his name right? Weiskopf. We're all on the linebacker slots together, and I tried to take a photo, but then one of them subbed out real quick. But I was like, we've been covering these guys on the prep side for a couple years, but they're the future of the linebacking corps.
Yeah, it's just future because the linebacking corps right now is as good as any in the country right there. We touched a little bit on defense to talk about it a little more, but Mike wore the shirt for a reason. Restaking. The first tweet I saw about the day was that he punted a 50-yarder and put it within the 3, and it's just, okay, all right, we're feeling a little better about that there. As much as we don't want to overreact to one side, we'll take the positives, certainly.
The first big pop from the crowd was that 50-yard punt, and
That's
it was
Iowa,
like, this
isn't
is so Iowa right now. It was kind of ridiculous, though, just watching him. They did a lot of practice punts before they went into full 11 on 11 from about where they'd snap it at the 50 and he'd punt from 35. And they did probably like 15. They rotated between Reese and Ty Nissen. And just when Reese was punting consistently, there was only one that didn't go inside the 10. And sometimes it'd go in the end zone. Sometimes it would be caught for a return. But like, if you're punting like that and you can flip the field, like, it's going to be like, and I know this sounds sacrilege, like you're not going to miss Tory Taylor. Now, let's see it in the game. Obviously it's a little different for a freshman who's, 18 or 19 coming in. But I was encouraged by that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he had that big long one that I think really drew some oohs and ahs from the crowd, and then he had another one that went. This is the one that I followed the ball and it went down, and I mean this is vintage Taylor to DeJean action.
Just right on the one.
Just right down to the 1 yard line with.
Is it Lutmer? Is Lutmer your main?
Was that it?
Gunman, yeah. That's what I saw.
I mean, that's his. Whether it's Terry
that
Roberts
one right
or
there.
Cooper
I'm gonna
Jean,
just
the last
replay
couple
that
years
one.
with Tory, that has been such a integral part. Yeah, I think that's Lutmer, number 6 there. But that's his important.
Watch this bounce.
Yeah, that's
right at the 3. It goes past the 10, but
whatever that school in Melbourne's doing to get these guys ready, please and thank you. They are they're coaching up some great generations.
And I included this in our show on Saturday that Tory Taylor actually played the first half for the Bears in their preseason game on Saturday. Only punted twice, but both punts went for 48 yards. Pinned one down at the 10 or 11 yard line. So I know all the Chicago fans, that's why I saw on their Twitter pages as well, with Chicago fans really excited about what Tory's bringing right away.
That's just how it goes. All right, we're excited about punting, which, that's just how it goes here.
If your offense is going to take a while to gel, if you have a good defense in punting, you could do a replay of last year for a few games, but, you just hope mid-season or Big Ten season, they just start to get a little bit better each week. Yeah. And last year it was kind of the opposite. It was kind of getting the same or worse.
And as we keep saying, game action is very different, but were you encouraged by what you saw of Drew Stevens on Saturday too? Kid who, missed a lot of kicks last year, got taken out, didn't get much of a chance to redeem himself late in the year, but looked pretty good, nailed some pretty deep kicks on Saturday.
Yeah, I was encouraged. I had some notes. I had him 7 for 8, but I've heard some people say he was perfect. The only one he missed, at least by my account, I thought he made it, but the ref went like this. So maybe the ref was just doing some, like a game simulation kind of thing. Made a 52-yarder, I think, unofficially, and then another 49-yarder. Yeah. So he looked good to me. Trip Woody, the other kicker, missed the first 2, but then he was perfect the rest of the day. So he went 5 for 5 after his first 2 misses.
Okay.
At least by my count.
Yeah. I mean, Kirk said on Friday that Drew Stevens is just a totally different player than who he was a year ago and who he was even in January. So I think that Iowa fans can rest easy with what the kicking game is going to look like to start the season too.
No, I think that says a lot about Drew. I mean, to have your gig kind of seized from you at the end of the Nebraska game, or at least for one kick, and a kick that can define a career, and certainly will for Marshall Meter at Iowa, since that's the only time we saw him. Happy trails to him. That says a lot. You just drew the illusion of you get hit, and what are you going to do? And a position that doesn't get hit a whole lot in kicker and punter and special teams like that. But for Kirk to go out his way to say, like, that's a different kid who's kind of answered the bell, that's encouraging at a position where you don't maybe look for that kind of gut check situation. I think that says a lot about Drew Stevens, and that's a position you like to have a little solace in, kick, especially for Iowa, punting and kicking. If you can have a lot of faith and trust in those 2 spots, I think you're in a heck of a lot better shape than you would be otherwise.
Yeah, I think special teams looked pretty solid all around, and I think the punt returner was Caden Weegan, and then the kick returner is a couple guys, but Caleb Johnson was looking like he's going to be out back there game 1, so pretty encouraging.
Sure. Let's switch over to the defense. We've alluded to it. We know how many guys are back. You got 3 guys that were just announced today as Bednarik, watch list guys, and Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, and Sebastian Castro, and they are just 3 of the several guys back. You saw Quinn Schulte's pick 6. You got Kyler Fisher back. You got plenty of guys on the D-line back. Anything you saw out of them, any sort of notes? It's one of the most dangerous things you can do is assume that things are always going to stay the same. You hope they do for Iowa defense's sake, but anything you guys saw jump out? We talked about Nestor running with the ones. I don't know if he did specifically on Saturday. What do we see from the defense there?
So to start the practice, TJ Hall was actually the starting corner. He rolled an ankle pretty early. I think Kirk said it wasn't that serious, but then Nestor came in for him. Xavier didn't practice. I think it was another soft tissue injury.
Yep.
I saw Seb starting for a strong safety, and they started with the base 4-3 though, because Kyler Fisher was in. So I assume that's kind of, if Seb's not at the cash, he's at safety because he needs to be on the field. He's one of your best players. When they went cash, it looked like Seb moved to that cash role, and then Lutmer actually came in at strong safety. So he's in the mix there, but you don't assume X missing that much time. But I thought TJ looked good, Jamari looked good, and then I didn't see any difference when Nestor came in and subbed in for him.
Yeah,
Cool. Defense is fun.
I mean, yeah, frankly, yes. Like, any look to the defense is just very nitpicky at this point because you've got so much talent coming back. Just watching Jay Higgins out there, both on the field and on the sideline, you just get the sense that, like, boy, we get to have an NFL linebacker on our sideline this year. I mean, as nice as it would have been to have Cooper DeJean back, an NFL-ready cornerback, or safety, I should say, it sure is nice having Jay Higgins, a linebacker back who could be and maybe should be playing in the NFL right now, but he chose to come back to Iowa, and he's very NFL ready, but here he is helping lead this team out there. So you just get a very strong sense of leadership from him, and just incredible talent that we're going to have there.
But again, they're facing the Iowa ones, and I think the wide receiver part is probably the weakest position group on the offense. Still need someone to step up, and they will be tested earlier. I mean, I think Iowa State and Ohio State have NFL caliber wide receivers. So what does it look like when you're facing someone who, is a higher talent level than you're used to guarding? So we'll see, though. I'm encouraged to what I saw from them. They kind of didn't let any separation get going now. You can make the case, Iowa wide receivers haven't been separating that for the past few years. You're missing one of those uber talented wideouts on the outside, but overall encouraging from the defense.
Of course, we draw all the parallels back to last year and know what we saw last year. Again, you're in a situation where if Nick Jackson is your second best linebacker, that's a very advantageous place to be in. A guy who could, if he goes off again this year, become the NCAA's all-time leader in career tackles. But he and Jay both spoke about how maybe last year's accomplishments do not define this year's pursuits.
Yeah, it's up to us, and we understand that we're an older group, but that doesn't really mean much. It's really, we've still got to go out there every Saturday and win the games. Still got to make those plays. Still have to be disciplined. And we got to make sure we're not getting too comfortable. Obviously, when you're an older guy, you kind of think you can get away with some stuff, can let some loose ends slip. But I just feel like our program teaches detail, and Coach Parker's obviously not going to let us slack. So we're not satisfied with how we played last year, and that's a cool part. We're all excited to improve this year and keep pushing the needle forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think every single day you just want to keep on fine-tuning and working on everything. I don't think it's even fine-tuning, it's just working. You know what I mean? I think every single day that it's not like we've ever arrived, we've ever really done anything. I think that's what the guys think on the team. Like, we've never really done anything, so it's kind of like, okay, now we have to get better. I mean, we're nothing, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like keep improving, keep getting better, and just let everything else take care of itself.
I like that attitude. It reflects a little bit of what Mason Richmond said earlier this summer, talking to him just like, I was talking to him about weight room stuff. Like, are you chasing any PRs? What are you trying to get better at? And he's like, us upperclassmen, it's just more like maintain, sustain, just, you're not trying to rewrite record books necessarily. That's not maybe your primary pursuit. And, Nick said that too, of just, you're not trying to refine or retool, you're just working. And that's what it is. Yeah, you're in your sixth year of college football for a decent amount of guys on this defense. And what more is there to fine tune? You can always try to get better, but, you're not really maybe necessarily digging into one specific detail or anything. You're just kind of, let's just maintain across the board and keep working on the stuff you've always worked on to get you to where you are. I think that's an important thing, and it's the attitude these guys need to have no matter what they've accomplished. because the minute you start resting on your laurels is when you get a rude awakening.
It'd be really easy for a team with this much success on the defense to just be like, we're good, we'll be good next year, and just sit back and, like you said, rest on their laurels. But, I think they know that they're going to have to, I shouldn't say they have to bring it to a next level, but why not? If you're going to come back and go one last hurrah, wouldn't you want to work that hard and come back and try and, make a season to remember? So I think it's a cool narrative to have, and everyone can say that. There's a lot of teams that do say that, but I actually believe them, especially like Jay and Nick, those guys, what they say. I mean, a lot of players can gas you up and just give you what you want to hear, but I don't think they're lying. I think they're working on hard every day.
Go ahead.
If Nick Jackson is your second best linebacker, you're in pretty good shape. If Kyler Fisher is your third best linebacker, you're also in pretty good shape. If there's one guy that I would say maybe is motivated out there, it might be Kyler, just to go out and make a name for himself too. He knows that he's got two really talented and really experienced guys to learn from out there at the linebacker spot, and this could be a linebacking group that, could we have three guys with 100-plus tackles this year in the linebacking group alone? Like, those are three guys who can really chase the ball down.
You guys got a lot of guys flying around out there. Jay probably said it best. Phil Parker is not going to let them rest on laurels. And I know it sounds like Phil had some shoulder surgery in the offseason. And I can't imagine how ornery a Phil Parker, who's on the mend, is as well. He's probably hurting a little bit. That's going to irritate him. And yeah, Phil Parker will make sure the standard is met, and iron will continue to sharpen iron. And they're as much as he can do to make sure there's not any sort of stumble or sixth-year swoon. I think Phil will take care of that.
Yeah, also, when talking about the defense and these kind of practices, I always feel like it's harder to judge the defense than the offense because, A, they can't tackle, or they can't fully tackle unless they let the threes versus the threes kind of go full steam ahead, but they won't let the ones and ones, obviously for safety reasons. But and then, you can't touch the quarterback, so you don't know, is that pass rush going to make it to the quarterback? To me, it looked like it was a little bit better. They were getting pressure on an offensive line that I think is better on different plays, but in a game, are they going to make that sack? That's just what you got to see once game time comes, and it's kind of hard to judge from a practice like that.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to wait too much longer. 19 more days. Miles Taylor days. Adam Shada was 19, right?
Yeah. Maurice
Shada
Pavey.
days. Maurice Pavey. B.J. Lowry days. A lot of defensive backs at Iowa. I've worn that 1-9, and that's how many days we are out. We'll be back next Monday, and have we figured out what exactly we're going to talk about? We're going to hit some of these.
I think next Monday is the superlative ones.
There we go.
Because it gaps us until the next week when we have actual.
And that's game week.
Yeah, game week stuff.
Something to know, I was just looking up the preseason FCS polls. Illinois State coming in, number 20 in the FCS preseason. So, just something to look for with Illinois State as they come to Kinnick on.
So not a slouch, You've seen tight games between FCS-ranked teams. I think that South Dakota State team from a couple years ago was ranked a little higher, but...
And they're number one to start this season.
I think it would be a disservice to the MVFC, the Missouri Valley Football Conference, to call them the SEC of FCS football, only because I think they're better than that. The MVFC in FCS football is so much better than every other conference. It's not even close. So for them to go, they were 6-5 last year in the MVFC, and so you're losing to a lot of really good teams if you're just 6-5. And so they're a team that is going to bring. Hopefully we get a chance to see at least 2, if not 3, quarterbacks out there for Iowa on August 31st. But Illinois State, they're going to bring something to the table that day.
Did I see North Dakota, who Iowa State opens up against? They're pretty highly ranked, right? Maybe I didn't see that.
Let's see. Top 10, we've got South Dakota State, North Dakota State, South Dakota.
I might be thinking of South Dakota. Who just talked about Miles Taylor, coaches at South Dakota.
North Dakota is number 22.
Number 22. Okay, so they're in there. So a couple top 25 FCS teams rolling into the Hawkeye State on August 31st. So, we'll circle back next Monday, and can't wait for those superlatives. Can't wait to get in and to.
Can't wait to be wrong.
Oh man, it's my favorite part of the whole year. And that'll be fun, and certainly on the high school side, I'm guessing you guys are really getting into practices this week.
That's right, yeah. They just started practicing at 12:01 a.m. this morning. Cedar Rapids, Washington was out there at Kingston Stadium for practice, and so we're going to be out talking to some teams today. We have Xavier this afternoon I'm going to go chat with. This evening, going to talk to Cedar Rapids Kennedy, seeing what their next Division I commit at quarterback, Vinny Gianforte, what he's got to say, and we'll be going kind of around the metro this weekend. And we've got Prairie coming up, and Wash will talk to Linn-Mar, Marion. So got a lot of local teams we're going to be chatting with this week.
It's going to be fun getting ready for Eastern Iowa OT, of course, and that's going to be, as always, just a blast. If you're watching on YouTube, you see it on your screen right now, all the ways you can follow Eye on the Hawks throughout the year, and we'll get that Eastern Iowa OT stuff on those platforms in some way, shape, or form as well, because a lot of these guys, if you're the top of the heap in high school football in the state of Iowa, there's a chance you will be covered in Eye on the Hawks one way or another down the road. We just talked about a couple of those guys. So Eye on the Hawks on Twitter, and then the Iowa's News Now YouTube and Instagram feeds. We'll have anything and everything from Eye on the Hawks on there as well, on top of all the other stuff we do as a local news station. So we'll reset. We'll see you next Monday. Thanks to everybody for tuning in or listening. However you are consuming this podcast, we're getting into the thick of preseason, which isn't really the season, but we're doing what we can on August 12th. So for Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. See you next time on Eye on the Hawks.